The emergency session had been going on for 6 hours, and Counselor Vellum was tired. His old insectoid body ached under the bright lights of the council chamber. 12 species sat around the curved table, their faces showing the same expression, no matter how different their biology was. Fear. The war was going badly. Everyone knew it. The Korath Dominion had swallowed 6 star systems in 3 months. Their warships moved like a dark tide across the galaxy, burning stations, cracking defenses, and leaving nothing behind but silence. The Allied Rim territories, once proud and strong, were falling apart. Their fleets were scattered, their people were running, and the Galactic Council sat in this floating station above a dead star and argued about what to do next. Speaker Otha of the Polani Federation stood and spoke in his high, trembling voice. He was a tall creature, thin as paper, with silver skin that changed color with his emotions. The color of dread. He proposed that every member species send whatever military forces they had left, a combined fleet, a last stand. The delegates murmured. Some agreed. Most looked away. They all knew the truth. Even combined, their forces were not enough. The Korath had 800 warships. The Council had maybe 200, spread across dozens of systems. It was not a war anymore. It was a slow execution. Then a junior delegate from the Sithan Combine raised his hand. He was young, barely old enough to sit in this chamber. His voice shook when he spoke. What about Earth? The chamber went silent. Not the quiet of thought, the silence of something much deeper. Vellum's antennae flattened against his skull. Several delegates physically pushed back from the table, as if the word itself was dangerous. Otha's silver skin turned white. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Otha stood again. His voice was no longer trembling. We made a promise, he said. After Marin's drift, after what happened there, we swore, all of us, every species in this council, that we would never invite humans into a galactic conflict again. Never. The young delegate looked confused. He had been a child when Marin's drift happened. He had read about it in school, of course. Everyone had. But reading about it and understanding it were two very different things. Marin's drift had been a small conflict, a border dispute between 2 minor species over a mining system. It should have been nothing. The Council had asked Earth to send a peacekeeping force. A simple request. The humans had agreed, sent a small fleet, and arrived at the system, expecting to separate 2 arguing neighbors. What they found instead was a massacre. One side had begun killing civilians. Thousands were already dead. The human commander had assessed the situation, made a decision in less than 4 minutes, and then done something that no species in the galaxy had ever seen before. In 9 hours, the entire aggressor armada was destroyed. Every ship, every weapon platform, every defense satellite, gone, turned to dust and drifting metal. The humans had not lost a single vessel. They had moved through the enemy fleet like fire through dry grass. Their weapons were precise. Their tactics were impossible to predict. Their coordination was beyond anything the galaxy's best military minds could explain. And the worst part, the part that still gave Vellum nightmares 30 years later, was that the humans had not been angry. They had not been vengeful or cruel. They had been calm, professional. They destroyed an entire armada the way a doctor removes a tumor. Carefully, completely, and without emotion. When it was over, they rescued survivors from the wreckage. They gave medical aid to the same soldiers they had just defeated. Then they filed a report, packed up, and went home. The galaxy had watched in horror. Not because the humans were savage, because they were efficient. Because they did it so easily. Because they clearly could have done it at any time, and had simply chosen not to. Every species in the Council understood weapons. They understood anger, and war, and conquest. What they did not understand was a species that could destroy everything in its path, and then offer the survivors a glass of water. That gap between power and behavior was what terrified them. So they had made the promise. Earth was to be left alone. No invitations, no alliances, no military cooperation. The humans had shrugged and accepted it. They seemed almost relieved. Vellum brought the session to order and ruled the young delegate's suggestion out of order. The discussion moved on to supply routes and evacuation plans. But Vellum could not focus. His mind kept returning to the numbers. 800 Korath warships, a planet-cracking weapon that could turn entire worlds into rubble. 3 homeworlds in the weapon's path, including the Polani homeworld. Billions of lives. After the session ended, Vellum found Otha in a private corridor. The Polani's skin was still white. Vellum spoke quietly. The Korath have deployed the planet cracker. If they use it, your world dies first. Otha closed his eyes. I know. Our fleet cannot stop them. You know this. I know this too. Vellum reached out and touched Otha's arm. It was unusual for his species to touch others, but this was not a usual moment. Contact Earth, he whispered. But beg them to be restrained. Then he nodded, slowly, like a man agreeing to open a door he knew he could never close again. 12 hours later, on the other side of the galaxy, Ambassador Yoon Hana sat in her office on Earth's orbital station and read the encoded transmission. She read it twice. Then she leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She had been expecting this call for 3 months. She had hoped it would not come. She picked up her communicator and made a single call. Admiral Cho, they're asking. There was a long pause on the other end. She could hear the old man breathing. Fleet Admiral Cho Kaesan had been a soldier for 40 years. He had been at Marin's Drift. He remembered what it felt like to be feared by an entire galaxy for doing the right thing. Finally, his gravelly voice came through. How politely. Hana looked at the transmission again. She could almost feel the desperation bleeding through the words. Very. Then, Taesan said, tell them we're coming, and tell them we'll be gentle. Hana ended the call and stared out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, a galaxy that hated and feared her species was about to ask them to save it. And they would go, because that was what humans did. They helped, even when nobody wanted them to. Speaker Otha had prepared himself for many things. He had prepared for massive warships, armed soldiers in every hallway, weapons pointed at his shuttle the moment it arrived. He had prepared for aggression, suspicion, and cold military protocol. What he had not prepared for was music. When the Polani diplomatic shuttle docked at Earth's orbital station, Bekdu, the first thing Otha heard was soft piano music drifting through the corridors. The second thing he noticed was a young human woman in a clean uniform smiling at him and asking if he would like something to drink after his long journey. Otha's silver skin flickered between gray and pale blue. Confusion. The station was enormous, but felt strangely warm. There were plants growing along the walls. Real plants, not artificial ones. Otha passed a window and saw human soldiers sitting together in a common area, laughing about something. One of them was reading a book. Another was playing a game on a small screen. They looked up at the alien delegation with mild curiosity, and then went back to what they were doing. This was the species the galaxy feared. These people with their books, and their piano music, and their potted plants. Otha's aide, a nervous young Polani named Turi, leaned close and whispered, "This does not feel like a military station." Otha did not answer. He was beginning to understand something that most of the galaxy had missed. The humans were not dangerous because they were always ready for war. They were dangerous because war was so small a part of what they were. They could switch from music to destruction and back again without losing a step. That flexibility, that ease, was the truly frightening thing. Ambassador Yoon Hana met them in a bright room with large windows overlooking Earth below. She was a small woman with short black hair and calm eyes. She bowed slightly and gestured for them to sit. Then she poured tea, actual tea, in ceramic cups with her own hands. Otha had rehearsed his speech a dozen times on the journey. He had planned to be dignified, formal, and precise. Instead, sitting across from this quiet woman with a cup of warm tea in his hands, he found himself stumbling over his words. He explained the situation, the Korath, the planet cracker, the dying systems. He explained that the Council wanted Earth's help, but with limits. A containment action, limited engagement, controlled force. Hana listened without interrupting. When he finished, she nodded once. I understand. The Council wants us to help, but not too much. Otha's skin flushed pink. Embarrassment. Yes, that is an accurate way to say it. Hana smiled. It was a kind smile, but there was something behind it, something old and a little sad. We are used to this, Speaker Otha. Please do not feel uncomfortable. I will relay your request to our military. In the meantime, let me introduce you to the officer who will lead the response. Captain Kang Doha entered the room like a man arriving at a family dinner. He was in his mid-30s, average height, with a quiet face and steady hands. He shook Otha's hand gently, careful not to squeeze too hard. He sat down and poured himself tea. Then he asked Otha to describe the Korath fleet positions in detail. As Otha spoke, Doha listened with his head slightly tilted. Occasionally he nodded. Once or twice he smiled. Not a mocking smile, a small, thoughtful smile, the kind a person makes when solving an interesting puzzle. Otha realized with growing unease that Doha was not worried. He was not pretending to be calm. He was genuinely, completely calm. The man was hearing about 800 enemy warships and a planet-killing weapon, and his heart rate had not changed. How many ships will you send? Otha asked. Doha looked at Hana. He turned back to Otha and said, 5. Otha waited for the rest of the sentence. It did not come. 5 ships, Otha repeated. Against 800. Against 800, yes. Otha's skin went white again. Turi, standing behind him, made a small sound of distress. 5 ships. Either the humans were insane, or the galaxy's fear of them was not nearly large enough. Later that day, Fleet Admiral Cho Taeson addressed the task force in the main hangar. Otha and his delegation were invited to watch. Taeson was old. His face was lined and scarred, and his hair was completely white. He walked with a slight limp from an injury he had never bothered to fix. But when he spoke, every human in the room went still. He did not give a long speech. He told his people that the galaxy needed help. He told them that they would be feared for giving it. He told them to go anyway. Then he turned to Otha. The old admiral's eyes were not cold. They were tired. Tired in a way that Otha recognized. The tiredness of someone who had spent a lifetime being hated for doing the right thing. You asked us to be restrained, Taeson said. 5 ships. That is us being restrained. The 5 ships launched an hour later. The flagship was the Horizon's Edge, a sleek vessel that looked almost delicate compared to the massive warships of other species. It carried no visible weapons. Its hull was smooth and dark, like a river stone. The other 4 ships were similar, small, clean, quiet. Otha watched them go from the observation deck. Beside him, Turi whispered, "They are so small." Otha shook his head slowly. No, they are exactly the right size. We are the ones who do not understand the scale. Across the galaxy, every species with long-range sensors detected the energy signature of the 5 ships entering faster than light travel. The signature was unusual. It was not the brute force energy blast of Korath drives, or the gentle hum of Palani engines. It was something else entirely. a clean, sharp pulse that cut through space like a blade through silk. On the Korath front line, Admiral Grawl received the report and laughed. 5 ships. The humans had sent 5 ships against the greatest military force in the galaxy. He told his officers it was an insult, a joke. He would destroy them in minutes and send the wreckage back to Earth as a message. But Warlord Dren, sitting alone in his command chamber on the Korath homeworld, did not laugh. He had read the classified files from Marin's Drift. He had seen the footage that was never released to the public. He knew what 5 human ships could do. He began making contingency plans. In the council chamber, Vellum sat in the dark and watched the sensor data. 5 small points of light, moving across the galaxy toward the largest war in living memory. He gripped the railing in front of him until his claws left marks in the metal. "What have we done?" he whispered to the empty room. The room did not answer. The 5 lights kept moving, and somewhere aboard the horizon's edge, Captain Kang Doha sat in his chair, sipped his tea, and watched the stars blur past. Beside him, his tactical officer Shin Nari was already running battle simulations. She looked up from her screen and said, 97% success rate if we follow their rules of engagement. Doha raised an eyebrow. "And if we follow ours?" Nari smiled. It was not a kind smile. 99.8. Doha nodded and went back to his tea. The stars kept blurring. The galaxy kept holding its breath. The 5 Earth ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Chiron's belt. And for a brief moment, the universe was perfectly still. The asteroid belt stretched across the void like a river of broken stone, and somewhere inside it, 200 Korath warships waited in neat formation. Each one was massive. Dark metal hulls covered in weapons, engines glowing hot orange, shields humming with enough power to melt a small moon. They looked like predators crouching in the dark. The horizon's edge drifted forward slowly. Behind it, the 4 other Earth ships spread into a loose formation. They looked tiny, absurdly, impossibly tiny, against the wall of Korath metal ahead. Admiral Grawl stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the sensor display. 5 dots. He had positioned 200 of the Dominion's finest warships here, each one crewed by soldiers who had conquered entire civilizations. And the humans had sent 5 dots. He opened a communication channel. His voice boomed across the void, translated into human language. "Earth vessels, you have entered Korath's sovereign space. Surrender your ships immediately, or be destroyed. You have 1 minute." There was a pause. Then a calm voice answered. It belonged to Captain Kang Doha. "We are here on behalf of the Galactic Council. Please withdraw your forces from this system. We do not wish to fight." Growl cut the channel and laughed. He gave the order to fire. 200 ships fired at once. The volley was enormous. Thousands of energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and kinetic rounds screamed across the belt toward the 5 human vessels. The light was blinding. The asteroid rocks nearest to the firing line shattered from the shockwave alone. It was enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. When the sensors cleared, Growl leaned forward. He expected debris, the scattered remains of 5 foolish little ships. All 5 were still there, undamaged. They had not even moved. Growl's smile disappeared. On the bridge of the horizon's edge, Shin Nari looked up from her console. "Their weapons are interesting. Low-frequency plasma with magnetic containment. Powerful but slow. I have their shield frequencies mapped." She paused. "All of them." Doha nodded. "Begin." What happened next became the most studied military engagement in galactic history. Military academies across 100 worlds would replay it for centuries, and none of them would ever fully understand it. The 5 Earth ships moved. That was the only word for it. But it did not capture what actually happened. They accelerated so fast that the Korath tracking systems lost them for a full 3 seconds. When the sensors found them again, they were already inside the Korath formation. Nari called the maneuver the net. The 5 ships split apart and wove through the Korath fleet like thread through fabric. They moved in patterns that seemed random but were precisely coordinated. Each ship knew where the others were at every moment without any visible communication. They flowed around asteroids, slipped between enemy vessels, and struck with surgical accuracy. But they did not destroy. Every shot from the human ships hit the same targets. Engines first, then weapons, then communication arrays. One by one, the Korath warships went dark. Their engines died. Their weapons fell silent. Their shields collapsed. But their life support systems remained untouched. Their hulls stayed intact. The crews inside were alive, unharmed, and completely helpless. It took 90 minutes. 112 Korath warships disabled. 0 human casualties. 0 Korath deaths. Not a single life lost on either side. The remaining 88 Korath ships broke formation and fled. They did not wait for orders. They simply ran. A Polani observation vessel had been watching from a safe distance at the edge of the belt. Captain Mira, the senior officer aboard, had been recording everything for the Council's military archives. She was a veteran of 30 years. She had seen wars and battles and terrible things. But as she watched the footage play back on her screen, her hands began to shake. It was not the speed that disturbed her. It was not the power or the precision. It was the choice. The humans could have killed every Korath soldier in the belt. Their weapons were clearly capable of it. The disabled ships proved that the humans could hit anything they wanted with perfect accuracy. They had chosen their targets with the care of a surgeon choosing where to cut. Engines, not reactors. Weapons, not crew quarters. Shields, not hulls. They had fought a battle against 200 warships and treated it like a rescue operation. Mira's communications officer, a young Polani barely out of training, sat at his station with tears running down his face. Mira asked him what was wrong. "I am not crying because I am afraid of what they did," he said quietly. "I am crying because they could have done so much worse, and they chose not to. That is the most terrifying thing I have ever seen." Graal's flagship was the last to fall. Doha brought the Horizon's Edge alongside it personally. The great Korath vessel hung dead in space, its engines cold, its weapons silent. Inside, Graal stood on his dark bridge, surrounded by officers who could not look at each other. Doha's voice came through the speakers. It was still calm, still polite. "Admiral Graal, your crews will be recovered by Council medical ships. Please inform Warlord Dren that we would like to talk." Graal did not respond. He stared at the blank tactical display and tried to understand what had just happened. He had commanded 200 warships. He had fired first. He had every advantage. And a man with 5 ships and a cup of tea had taken it all apart in less time than it took to eat a meal. On the surface of a captured Korath supply station in the belt, Commander Park Ji-hun led a boarding team through the corridors. The station had surrendered without a fight. Its crew had watched the battle through their sensors and decided that resistance was pointless. Ji-hun moved through the empty hallways with his weapon lowered. His team secured rooms one by one. In the last storage bay, they found a Korath soldier hiding behind supply crates. He was young, very young, barely an adult by Korath standards. His uniform was too big for him. His hands were shaking. Ji-hun knelt down slowly. He pulled a water container from his belt and held it out. The young soldier stared at it with wide, frightened eyes. Ji-hun spoke in broken Korath. His pronunciation was terrible, but the words were clear. "War is over for you. Rest." The soldier took the water. His hands were still shaking, but after a moment he drank. Ji-hun sat down next to him on the floor and waited. He did not rush. He did not threaten. He just sat there, a human soldier beside a frightened enemy child, in a quiet room at the edge of a battlefield where nobody had died. Across the galaxy, Warlord Dren watched the battle footage alone. He played it 3 times. The first time, he watched with professional interest. The second time, with growing concern. The third time, with something he had not felt in 40 years of conquest. His hands trembled. He contacted the council directly. "Call them off," he said. "We will negotiate." But it was Councillor Vellum who hesitated now. Because as the old insectoid watched the footage himself, he realized something that chilled him more than the Korath ever had. The humans had fought with restraint. They had followed every rule the council had given them. They had disabled instead of destroyed, spared instead of killed, and asked politely before every action. And they had still made the greatest military force in the galaxy look like children playing with toys. If this was restraint, what was the alternative? Vellum opened a priority channel to Earth. His voice was thin and old and full of a fear that had nothing to do with the Korath. He said the words that would shock every species in the galaxy. "Ambassador Yoon, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I must make a request. Please, we beg you, leave Earth out of the rest of this war." The formal request arrived in clean diplomatic language, but the meaning was simple enough for a child to understand. The Galactic Council was asking Earth to stop helping, not because the humans had failed, because they had succeeded too well. Ambassador Yoon Hana read the message in her office aboard Station Baekdu. She read it slowly, then set down her tea and sat in silence for a long time. Through the window, Earth turned below her, blue and green and wrapped in clouds. Somewhere down there, people were living their lives, going to work, eating dinner, holding their children. They did not know that the galaxy considered them the most dangerous species in existence. Hana had spent her entire career trying to build bridges between Earth and the other species. She had learned 6 alien languages. She had studied their customs, their art, their fears. And every time, at every summit and every conference, she had seen the same look in their eyes when they looked at her. Polite smiles, hiding deep unease. Like people being friendly with a wolf they hoped would not notice it was hungry. She picked up her communicator and called the horizon's edge. Captain Kang Doha received the news on his bridge. His 5 ships were holding position at Chiron's belt, surrounded by the still drifting hulls of the Korath vessels they had disabled. Council medical ships had arrived to collect the Korath crews. The human ships floated quietly among them, helping with the rescue, guiding damaged escape pods to safety. "They want us to stand down," Hana told him. "Not withdraw, just hold position and take no further action." Doha looked out the bridge window at the vast field of silent warships. His crew had done this in 90 minutes, without killing anyone, and now they were being told to stop because they were too good at not killing anyone. "Understood," he said. After the call, Shin Nari found him in the observation lounge. She stood beside him and looked out at the same view. Her arms were crossed, her jaw was tight. "They called us in to save them," she said quietly, "and now they want us gone because we are too good at saving them." Doha did not look at her. "That is the price of being what we are, Nari. It is not fair." "No, it is not." They stood in silence for a while. Outside, a council medical ship drifted past, its lights blinking softly. A Korath escape pod floated beside it, and through the tiny window, Doha could see a Korath soldier looking out at the horizon's edge. The soldier's expression was not anger. It was awe. On the Korath homeworld, Warlord Dren sat in his war room and smiled for the first time in days. His offer to negotiate had been a lie. He had never intended to stop. The pause was a trick, a gift of time that the council had handed him because they were too afraid of their own allies to let them keep fighting. While the humans sat still and the council argued, Dren moved his greatest weapon into position. The Gorak spear was a planet-cracking device, a massive orbital cannon that could fire a beam into a planet's core and turn it into a ball of fire. It had taken 20 years to build. It was the reason the Korath had started this war. With the spear, they did not need to conquer worlds. They could simply threaten to end them. Dren aimed it at the Pelani homeworld. 7 billion Pelani lived there. 7 billion lives balanced on the tip of a weapon that the Council had no way to stop, because the only force capable of stopping it had been asked to sit down and be quiet. The threat arrived at the Council chamber like a bomb. Dren's message was short. Surrender all Allied Rim territories, or the Pelani homeworld burns. Councillor Vellum read the message and felt something break inside him. He had made a mistake. He had let fear of humanity push him into pulling back the only force that could have prevented this. And now billions of lives were in danger, because he had been more afraid of his rescuers than his enemies. The emergency session was the ugliest in Council history. Delegates screamed at each other. Some blamed Earth for escalating the war by intervening. Others begged for the humans to come back. Speaker Otha sat in his chair and said nothing. His silver skin was the color of ash. His homeworld was the target. His people would die. A delegate from the Sci-Fan Combine slammed his fist on the table. You sent them away. You sent away the only ones who could help us, because you were frightened of them. Vellum closed his eyes. Yes, he said. I did. It was the first time in anyone's memory that a council leader had admitted a mistake so simply. On Station Baekdu, Hana watched the council's emergency feed with Fleet Admiral Cho Tai-sun. The old admiral sat in a chair beside her, his scarred hands resting on his knees. He watched the aliens argue and panic and blame each other, and his expression did not change. They will ask again, he said. Yes, Hana replied. And we will go again. Yes. Tai-san turned to look at her. Even knowing they will hate us for it? Even knowing that when it is over they will look at us with the same fear and wish we had never come? Hana met his eyes. She was half his age and had seen a fraction of what he had seen. But in that moment, her voice carried the weight of every human who had ever helped someone and been hated for it. That is what it means to be human, Admiral. Even when they throw stones at you after. Tayson was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded once and stood up. I will prepare the orders. The call from Willem came 2 hours later. Hana answered it in the communications room. The old insectoid's face filled the screen. He looked broken. His antenna hung limp. His eyes, usually sharp and careful, were wet. Ambassador, he began, and his voice cracked. He paused, collected himself, and tried again. Ambassador Yoon, I must ask something of your people, something I have no right to ask. Hana waited. We need you. I know what this costs your people. Not in ships or soldiers. I know you have those. I mean what it costs in how the galaxy sees you. Every time you fight for us, we fear you more. Every time you save us, we push you further away. I know this, and I am asking anyway. His voice broke again. I am sorry. Hana looked at the broken old alien on her screen. She thought about the stones. She thought about Marin's drift, and the 30 years of isolation that followed. She thought about her parents, who had been diplomats before her, who had spent their entire lives trying to earn the galaxy's trust, and never quite succeeding. Counselor, she said gently, send us the coordinates. Doha received the green light 14 minutes later. He stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge and looked at his crew. They were tired. Some of them were angry. They had been told to sit and watch while an enemy repositioned a weapon that could kill billions. And they had obeyed because they were told to. The Council has asked us to save a world that is afraid of us, Doha said. His voice was steady. His eyes moved across every face on the bridge. Let us go remind them that fear and respect are not the same thing. The 5 ships powered up their drives. Nari was already at her console, running simulations for the assault on the Gorath spear. Her fingers moved fast, pulling up data, mapping trajectories, calculating angles of attack. Then she stopped. She stared at her screen for a long moment. "Captain," she said quietly. Doha looked at her. "The spear is defended by 300 elite warships. The weapon itself has its own shield generator and point defense network. We cannot disable this one gently, not in the time we have." She looked up at him, and for the first time since he had known her, Shin Nari was not smiling. "This one is going to cost us." Doha held her gaze. Then he turned back to the window. The stars blurred as the drive engaged. "Then it costs us," he said. The 5 lights moved across the galaxy once more. And once more, the galaxy held its breath. The Palani homeworld was beautiful from orbit. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds curling across the surface like brushstrokes on a painting. 7 billion people lived down there. They had schools and hospitals and parks where children played. They had libraries filled with thousands of years of history. They had families sitting together at dinner tables, not knowing that a weapon hanging in the darkness above them was about to turn everything they had ever built into fire. The Gorath spear hung in high orbit like a metal spine. It was enormous, nearly 3 kilometers long, covered in armored plating and surrounded by a web of shield generators. At its tip, a focusing array gathered energy from a reactor buried deep inside the structure. When it fired, it would send a concentrated beam through the planet's crust and into the core. The reaction would take 11 minutes. After that, there would be no planet. Around the spear, Warlord Dren had positioned 300 of his best warships. Not the regular fleet. These were his personal guard, crewed by veterans who had fought in every campaign of the war. They formed a sphere around the weapon, shields overlapping, weapons hot. Behind them, Dren's own flagship sat watching. He was not worried about the Council fleet. He was worried about 5 small ships. The 5 Earth vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Palani system. Captain Kang Doha stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge and looked at the tactical display. 300 warships, a planet-killing weapon. 4 hours until it fired. He opened a channel to the Council. "Councillor Vellum, I am requesting full combat authority." There was a pause. Then Vellum's voice came through, barely above a whisper. "Do what you must, Captain." Doha closed the channel and looked at Nari. She was already ready. Her screens were filled with data, trajectories, attack patterns. She looked back at him and nodded once. "All ships," Doha said. "No restraint." The 5 ships surged forward. This time was different. At Chiron's belt, the humans had fought like surgeons, precise, gentle, careful. Here, they fought like a storm. The 5 vessels tore into the Korath formation at speeds that broke every known limit. They did not weave or dance. They drove straight through, weapons firing in continuous streams, targeting engines and weapon systems with brutal efficiency. The Korath veterans were good, the best the Dominion had. They reacted fast, closed ranks, and poured fire at the human ships from every angle. The void lit up with plasma and energy beams. Asteroids caught in the crossfire shattered into dust. The noise on every sensor frequency was deafening. The Earth ship Vanguard took a direct hit to its port side. The shields held, but barely. Its captain, a woman named Bek Soyan, pushed the ship harder, driving deeper into the formation. Behind her, the Earth ship Tidal broke left and drew fire from a cluster of Korath destroyers, giving Soyan room to maneuver. Nari coordinated the battle from her console, like a conductor leading an orchestra made of fire. She sent commands in rapid bursts, adjusting formations in real time, reacting to every Korath move before it was fully completed. Under her guidance, the 5 ships moved as one creature with 10 arms and a single mind. But 300 ships were 300 ships, and the Korath were not surrendering this time. The Earth ship Daybreak was the first to fall. A concentrated volley from 12 Korath destroyers collapsed its shields and tore through the hull. The ship broke apart in a flash of light. 63 crew members, gone in seconds. On the horizon's edge, Doha felt the loss like a physical blow. He gripped the arm of his chair and forced himself to breathe. 63 people. His people. He would remember every name later. But not now. Now there were 7 billion lives counting on him. Continue the advance, he said. The second ship, Tidal, fell 20 minutes later. It had been covering the approach to the Gorath Spear, absorbing fire meant for the other 3 vessels. Its captain, a young man named Ko Unji, kept the ship fighting until the last possible second, drawing as many Korath warships away from the spear as he could before the hull gave way. 104 crew members. 3 ships left against 270, and the spear was still charging. Commander Park Ji-hoon sat in an assault shuttle in the launch bay of the Horizon's Edge. His boarding team was strapped in around him. Their job was simple and almost certainly fatal. Get inside the Gorath Spear. Reach the firing mechanism. Shut it down. Nari's voice came through the shuttle speakers. Commander Ji-hoon, I am creating an opening in the Korath line. You will have a window of approximately 40 seconds. Understood, Ji-hoon said. The shuttle launched. It was small and fast, built for exactly this kind of insane mission. Nari's opening appeared, a brief gap in the Korath formation, created by the 3 remaining Earth ships throwing themselves at the enemy with everything they had. Ji-hoon's shuttle dove through the gap like a needle through closing fabric. A Korath point defense battery caught the shuttle's tail as it approached the spear. The impact slammed Ji-hoon forward in his harness. Warning lights flooded the cabin. The shuttle was damaged, but still flying. Ji-hoon brought it in hard, crashing through a maintenance hatch on the spear's surface. Inside, the Gorath Spear was a maze of corridors and machinery. Ji-hoon and his team moved fast. They fought through 3 Korath security checkpoints, clearing each one with speed and precision. Ji-hoon took a plasma burn to his left arm. He wrapped it quickly and kept moving. They reached the core chamber. The firing mechanism was a massive column of energy, spinning and building toward the discharge that would kill a world. The controls were locked. There was no remote shutdown. Nari had warned him about this. The only way to stop the weapon was a manual override at the base of the column, which would trigger a controlled collapse of the energy field. The person operating the override would need to stay at the controls until the collapse was complete. The radiation would be severe. 12 soldiers who had followed him into the heart of a planet-killing weapon without hesitation. Get out, he said. All of you, back to the shuttle. His second-in-command, a young woman named Lee Miso, stepped forward. Commander, you cannot do this alone. I can, and I will. That is an order, Sergeant. Miso held his gaze for a long moment. Then she saluted, turned, and led the team back the way they had come. Ji-hoon sat down at the override controls. His left arm was bleeding through the bandage. His body ached. Through the walls, he could hear the battle raging outside. He thought about the young Korath soldier he had given water to at Chiron's belt. He thought about 7 billion people on the planet below who would never know his name. He activated the override. Outside, Captain Doha had broken through the Korath defensive line. He brought the Horizon's Edge face to face with Warlord Dren's flagship. The 2 ships hung in the void, surrounded by the wreckage of battle. Dren opened a channel. His face was twisted with rage and something deeper, something that might have been genuine confusion. Why, he demanded, why do you fight for species that despise you? They fear you. They sent you away. They will do it again. Why do you keep coming back? Doha looked at the warlord on his screen. He thought about the question. It was a fair one. The galaxy feared humanity. The council had asked them to leave. And here he was, bleeding and burning, fighting for people who might never look at him without unease. Because someone has to, Doha said. He fired. Dren's flagship went dark. At the same moment, deep inside the Gorath spear, Ji-hoon completed the override sequence. The spinning column of energy shuddered, groaned, and began to collapse inward. The weapon folded in on itself like a dying star, its energy consuming its own structure. The massive cannon bent and crumpled, and then it was still. The Polani homeworld turned peacefully below, untouched. 7 billion people still having dinner, still holding their children, still living. Nari's rescue team pulled Ji-hoon from the wreckage 40 minutes later. He was alive. Barely. The radiation had done terrible things to his body, but he was breathing. When they carried him to the medical shuttle, he opened his eyes and looked up at Nari. "Did it work?" he whispered. Nari nodded. She was crying. She did not bother to hide it. The Korath Dominion surrendered 3 days later. Warlord Dren was taken into council custody. The war was over. 2 Earthships destroyed, 167 human lives lost, and a planet saved. The council held a formal session 1 week later. Every species was present. The chamber was full and silent. Councillor Vellum stood at the center, his old body trembling with the effort of standing. But he stood. "We called them monsters," he said. His voice was thin, but steady. "We called them too dangerous to trust. We made them promise to stay away. And when we were dying, they came anyway. They bled for worlds that feared them. They gave their lives for people who had turned them away." He paused. The chamber was so quiet that the hum of the station's engines was audible. Let the record show that humanity did not fight this war for territory, not for power, not for glory. They fought it because we asked, and because it was right. And we owe them a debt that I do not think we can ever repay. Months later, Doha visited Ji-hoon in a rehabilitation center on Earth. Ji-hoon was learning to walk again. The radiation damage had been severe, but human medicine was stubborn, and so was Ji-hoon. He was sitting in a garden when Doha arrived, sunlight on his face, watching birds move between the trees. "Think they will call us again?" Ji-hoon asked. Doha sat down beside him. He looked up at the sky, blue and vast and full of stars, that held 1,000 species who feared what he was. "Probably. And we will go? Probably." Ji-hoon laughed quietly. It hurt his ribs, but he laughed anyway. "Yeah, we probably will." 6 months after the war, Ambassador Yoon Hana stood before the United Earth Assembly and delivered her final report. She spoke for 40 minutes about the war, the battles, the losses, and the politics. Then she set down her notes and spoke from memory. "The galaxy is afraid of us," she said. "Perhaps they always will be, but I would rather be feared for our compassion than loved for our indifference." The assembly was silent. Then slowly they began to stand, one by one, until every person in the room was on their feet. Across the galaxy, in the years that followed, the war was recorded in 1,000 different histories by 1,000 different species. They wrote about the battles and the tactics and the politics. They wrote about the Gorath spear and the Council's mistakes and the Korath surrender. But the detail that survived the longest, the one that alien parents told their children at bedtime, the one that was carved into memorial stones on worlds that had never seen a human face, was not about weapons or warships or clever strategies. It was the image of a human soldier sitting on the floor of a supply station, holding out water to a frightened enemy boy, and saying in broken words that were barely understandable, but perfectly clear, "War is over for you. Rest." That was what the galaxy remembered about Earth. Not the power, not the fear, a water.